Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Sneve. It's been a long week. We worked with FNX in San Bernardino, California to bring you live coverage on election night. Donald Trump will return to the White House as the 47th president. While most of the country voted for Republican candidates, there are still a few races that are too close to call, as we record this program on November 7th. One of those races is District 2, U.S. House of Representatives in Arizona. Former President of the Navajo Nation, Jonathan Nez, faces incumbent Eli Crane. What does this mean for Indian country? Here's Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole.
I find that Democrats and Republicans, are good on different issues. I mean, we really don't have tribal questions for the most part don't fall along liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat kinds of lines. Two touchstone issues for us are always tribal sovereignty and are always the trust responsibility of the United States government. That is, their responsibility to keep their word and their agreements that they've made with Native peoples. And I find each party can be good at that or can fail at that. And it's one of the things I'm most grateful for. We have a very robust Native American caucus.
This comes at a time when Indigenous participation in public service across the country is at an all-time high. Stewart Huntington reports.
The state of Native American representation in American political institutions is mixed but growing.
Elise Blassingame studies Native representation and is keeping a keen eye on the election.
We've had a lot of advances, not only in Native people running for office, but also winning, especially women, in the past 10 years. And we've seen a lot of success in state legislatures and at the local level. Congress has been a little slow. We've had only 27 people who have self-identified as Native to ever serve in Congress.
One of those, Oklahoma Republican Tom Cole, is the longest-serving Native House member.
Well, it's a great honor. Frankly, it's not something I ever thought that would happen.
He says it's imperative that Indigenous voices be heard.
I think from a Native standpoint, it's always important to participate. Sometimes we're taken for granted. Now, the reality is, we have a lot to say about what happens in a number of states. We're pretty critical voting constituency.
Including Cole, there were 9 Native candidates who ran for House seats this cycle. That included incumbents Mary Peltola in Alaska, Sharice Davids in Kansas, and Oklahomans Josh Brackeen and Cole. Not all results were in before our deadline, but it is clear that Congress will not
get back up to 6 members of Congress, which is the highest or the most we've ever had serving at one given time.
I asked Blassingame about what her research tells her about why representation matters. Her answer? It gets results.
We found that when people do run for office, it does have a substantive impact on sovereignty-focused policies, and that's at all levels of the American government. So between 2018 and 2021, we had a group of really strong Native women who were elected and serving in state legislatures. They produced bills on varying topics, but one of the galvanizing issues, of course, was missing murdered Indigenous women and people. And so those bills created resources, task forces, held law enforcement accountable to collect data that otherwise wasn't being collected. And the data clearly shows if those Native women had not been in the legislature, it's quite likely that there wouldn't be that agenda setting by people who understand tribal communities and tribal nation needs if those folks weren't at the table.
And getting to the table often takes a whole lot of work by a whole lot of people. I caught up with one activist putting her everything into strengthening Native power.
I've been calling, I've been messaging people, because we get that.
Sherry Littledog's been busy on the Native voter registration front lines for the Great Falls, Montana offices of Western Native Voice.
I just been so busy, I probably deleted it.
It's a calling and it's personal.
I made all my family vote, all of them, not just the ones I have down here.
The stakes were high. The Montana Senate race between incumbent John Tester and GOP rival Tim Sheehy had real implications in Indian country. Tester has long served on the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, and political newcomer Sheehy had no mention of Montana's 12 tribes on his website and was recorded propagating negative slurs against natives.
My sister, my brother, my daughter, me, my other daughter.
The native vote didn't bring Tester over the finish line, but Little Dog and Western Native Voice will keep working to keep Western Native voices loud.
And my niece and my nephew. So that was 7 people right there. I made them all vote.
And continue raising Native participation.
That's our main focus, is a Native people, so we can have Native power at the polls. We need to get our people there so their vote does count.
On the national level and others. Advanced Native political leadership keeps track of representation on the local level as well. This year, it identified 238 Native leaders serving across the U.S. at the city, town, and county levels. Leaders like Daniel Jourdain, who ran unsuccessfully for mayor in Bemidji, Minnesota.
Migiziens Indigenous cause. Mesquawa Zaga e Gunning Indunji Makwa Dudem. My English name is Dan Jourdain. My Ojibwe name.
Jourdain, who previously served on the city council, wants to serve all of Bemidji, including its native residents and visitors.
I do think sometimes that there might be racism or racial tensions in this city, but I think it has to come down to putting your differences aside and working together as a whole community. You know, right now we're surrounded by the 3 largest tribes in Minnesota, which is Red Lake Nation, White Earth Nation, and Leech Lake Nation. So we want to find ways to empower them and embrace them in the city.
And back to the national level, we see that despite advances, Natives are still underrepresented.
If our Congress was to look more like our nation, we would have 15 Native members of Congress. So we have some work to do.
But there is some optimism.
Honestly, I think we're in a little bit of a renaissance right now where tribes are having a bigger impact on national policy and are better able to defend themselves and advance their interests than they certainly were 50 or 100 years ago.
For ICT from Ute Homelands, I'm Stewart Huntington.
Indian country historically tends blue, but this year was different. Mark Trahant talks with Mike Stopp about this trend in this episode of IndigiPolitics.
Welcome to another segment of IndigiPolitics. I'm Mark Trahant, and I'm talking to our regular commentator, Michael Stopp. And I just want to say this from the beginning, that you really saw this one coming, and a lot of us were really wrong about the outcome Tuesday night, but you had this wired. Maybe what led you to that?
Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate you having me back on here to talk a little bit. It really came down to what I was hearing coming out of the Harris-Walz campaign. I thought their messaging was off. I didn't think they were addressing issues that the regular voter really wanted to hear. If they were worried about the things that the Harris and the Democrat machine was talking about, specifically the character of Trump, some of the things that have been said about him, his background, then that would have already been in the calculus. You know, we would not see a neck and neck race going into it. That told me that that was not the issues that voters were looking at, and essentially that the Democrats were talking to themselves. And so another place that we saw that close to the end was when Mark Cuban actually went out to speak as a surrogate in Nevada for Harris. We saw him flip people in the room. And that's because he was talking about the issues that they care about. That he was talking about the economy. He was explaining the economic details of the Harris plan. And I think they needed more of that from the Harris campaign.
One of the things that strikes me is when you look at particularly the union members and what angered them, some of them were mad about things that really no president can resolve. For example, the changing nature of pensions.
And I think there's an undercurrent there, and I kind of talked about this Tuesday night. There's an undercurrent of anti-establishment on both sides of the aisle. When you get into you start talking about Occupy Wall Street and you talk about the Tea Party. I know those are not necessarily active groups right now, but they really came from that time frame in 2008 and started movements in both parties that were really anti-establishment. You know, you've got the Occupy Wall Street group that is so mad at the big banks and the big business people in New York, and then you've got the Tea Party people who were very upset with the establishment government people in Washington, D.C., and you had this time in American history where you saw basically those government elites bail out those financial elites, and the who paid the price for that? It was the American people. And there were two distinct responses, but they were basically, to me, different sides of the same coin. They were upset that the elites were basically watching each other's backs, and no one was watching out for the everyday American. And we've seen that happen throughout the years, and we've seen that kind of show up in different polling. And I think that's what created this push for Donald Trump, which is weird. Again, as I said on Tuesday, it is weird to see a billionaire from New York be the anti-establishment candidate, but that is kind of where we're at.
Think are the most important things that tribal nations and citizens should be thinking about as they shape a new administration?
I think it comes back to education. And I'd probably say that every time, making sure that, we have a number of newly elected members of Congress. We need to make sure that we're going out and talking to them. Obviously, as far as Indian policy go, John Tester was someone that had a lot of background and knowledge when it came to Indian policy. His replacement, Tim Sheehy, does not. I know that there's some concerns about some disparaging remarks he's made. I think those are things we're going to have to get past and get up to the hill and educate him on these Native issues to get him up to speed, because regardless of what we may think of him, he's going to be the one making the votes. So we need to get up there and educate him on what's going on. And I know that's difficult in politics because we take so many things personally in the political level. But I think for Natives, especially because we're such a small segment, we can't afford not to get over these things and educate these folks that we disagree with, because without the education, they're never going to understand the unique relationships of tribes in the United States.
One of the metrics that was successful, I think, in the Biden administration was the appointment of some 80 plus people from Indian country to outside of the normal channels of government. Do you think any of that will continue?
From what I'm hearing from the Trump side and the transition team is they're going to be a little slow rolling it out. The first appointments are going to go to those that they have been very loyal. There's still a lot of anxiety and concern about who they're going to put in the administration. They don't want to be fighting their own people. They have also been in discussions about putting Natives in what are not necessarily traditionally Native roles, but in regular roles.
If the House indeed was Republican, as it looks like it will at this point, and that's really all the branches of government under single party control, how does the federal government get reshaped with a mandate like that?
You're going to see a hard push to the right on a lot of the policies, certain policies, not every policy. As you and I have discussed in the past, Donald Trump's trade policy is not a free trade policy, which is normally a free market viewpoint that is held by Republicans traditionally. That is something that is not necessarily far right, but we're going to see more of that. Hopefully we'll have someone in his ear that can explain the challenges that come with tariffs and if you take them too far. And how important free trade is to other countries. I understand the challenges with China and bad actors, but when you start talking about developing economies, trade with the United States is very important. So you're going to see things like that. We still have the cloture vote in the Senate, so you still need the 60 to get past most things there. There is reconciliation, so we're going to have some reconciliation bills that come out, that policies that are going to go through that'll be very interesting to see what the priorities are for both the administration and the Senate, because that's the one vote where you only need a simple majority and not the 60 votes. So we'll see.
Yeah, budget reconciliation is a measure that Democrats used very effectively when they had that slim majority. So it'll be interesting to see the tables turned on it. Let me ask one more about trade, because I think it does impact Indian country. Is so many of the agricultural sector interests were very much in favor of Trump, and yet that's an industry where tariffs hit really hard, and it did last time in his administration.
A lot of times the tariffs are associated specifically with China, and people feel that China is in fact a bad actor and that they need to be punished in in some way. And I get that actually the consumer ends up paying the tariff, but the point is that it reduces the amount of actual products sold by China to the United States. I don't want to get into that, but I've seen some arguments that you're not really punishing China, you're punishing the consumer. And I understand that argument as well. But so if you have this mindset that you want to punish China, and then you have tariffs in other places where I don't think that we necessarily should, I don't think people make that connection yet. I think if we continue with broad tariffs and broad trade disagreements, then I think people are going to realize exactly why that's bad.
Well, in fact, when with farmers, it's not the tariffs that impact them, it's the retaliation and the ability to sell their products overseas.
Right, exactly.
What kind of people do you think will be coming from Indian country in the administration of Indian things?
I'd be surprised if you don't see a lot of the same people that came last time from 16 or 17 to 21. Quite frankly, there aren't that many conservatives, natives that want to serve. It's an issue I'm struggling with myself. I've been out of Washington for 4 years now. I'm not in a hurry to go back, but it's one of those things. Once you're asked to serve, you need to think about it. But I do know a number of the folks that were in senior positions last time are going to be asked again and will likely serve again.
I shouldn't go without asking you about Senator Mark Wayne Mullen.
I think he's going to continue to be a close advisor to the president, but I don't think he's leaving the Senate. At least I really hope not. I have already texted him and told him, please don't leave the Senate. I think we need him there.
Mike Stopp, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's a crisis in Indian country, and that's missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Some of the causes are based in lack of police enforcement, cultural and rural isolation. Individuals and organizations across the country are working hard to solve this issue. One of them is Lily Mendoza.
Lily Mendoza is a Lakota warrior, and the Bush Foundation recognizes that. She is among the 24 leaders from the Dakotas and Minnesota selected for a fellowship. She created the Red Ribbon Skirt Society to support the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women.
A couple years ago, myself and some families that their daughters were victims of MMIWG, we went to Billings, Montana to testify for the Not Invisible Act. And when we went there, we all went outside. I said, we need to go out, we need to pray before we testify here. And so we all went outside, and as we were all standing there, I said to the group, does anybody know how to speak their language and do a prayer? Nobody did. And I said, oh, that's okay. So I said, we'll do the best we can, And so we prayed, and we smudged, we laid down tobacco. And at that moment in my mind, myself told myself, I've got to learn this. I have to learn this, because the mothers and the grandmothers that were there, we were all the same age, right? And some of them there were older than me. And it was kind of a feeling of being ashamed because they didn't know their language and know how to pray in their language. And so that just kind of drove me to say, I have to do this now. And how I'm going to start learning the language is through song. And one of the things that I need to do is I need to actively participate in learning those sacred songs when I'm in ceremony. Because right now what I do is I do go to ceremony, but I really have a hard time, because it's interesting, because when you go into an inipi, there's other women that are my age, and all of the young people are there, and they're singing the songs. And so I know I really listen, I really try and sing along, but it's something growing up that was taken away from us, and so I have to learn this. I really do have to learn it for healing, and then to help some of our other women.
Mendoza promotes learning and education through her work.
Spending a lot of time on the different reservations on the Northern Plains, providing access to literature onto the reservation. So the idea of scholastic, I took that idea and really featured Native American literature. So I would go and do Native American book fairs across the Northern Plains.
Prayer and ceremony at sacred sites bring healing to Mendoza.
The families that I work with, the mothers and the grandmothers, and other members of the family as well, boy, they sure need some healing. Having lost their daughters, granddaughters to murder. And so a lot of this, what I want to be able to do is learn it. I have to learn it for myself, and I have to heal for myself, because I've been doing this work since 2016. And I do spend a lot of time, I'll go to Bear Butte, I'll take prayer flags, all of those sorts of things up there, lay down tobacco, do, sage, all of those sorts of things, because I know I need to heal. And, even for example, this past couple of days, there was a murder here in our community. And just yesterday I went and visited the mother, and she's having a hard time. And obviously she's having a hard time. And so what happens is that for me personally, I need to go to Bear Butte. I need to go there and then within the next couple of days and spend time there healing and in prayer. Because I think that's the only way that I can help people. And I think probably what's happening too is within our society, we're kind of relearning that within our society. And so we're actively participating, going to the sacred sites and taking the women. We're going to go camping, spend time together in relationship and in prayer. And the part of that I want to be able to leave behind is a sense of connection to the land, how important prayer is, and how important, no matter how age we are, that we need to heal, however that happens.
For ICT from the homelands of the Lakota Oyate, I'm Shirley Sneve.
A priority for tribes across the country is a movement we call Landback. In Minnesota, there is progress, but setbacks as well. Stewart Huntington visited 2 tribes who embrace this movement.
We turn now, as we often do here on the ICT broadcast, to the land, and specifically to efforts at Landback. In Minnesota this year, one such effort hit a roadblock.
Motion to table the bill, the Senate file 3480 prevail.
While another had historic success.
Thank you for joining us in celebrating this return. Yes.
But each underscored, as I found out on a recent visit, the sometimes complicated relationship between tribes and counties. Much of the original White Earth Reservation today is state forest. A bill introduced this year would have returned that land to the tribe. The bill failed in part after legislators echoed county concerns over citizen access to the land, concerns tribal leaders call unwarranted.
Buju, Wanaquint, Indigenous. Hello, everyone. My name's Laura Lee Erickson. Turtle is my clan, and I'm from White Earth. We want to protect the land. We want to keep it open for everybody, not only for us now, but for future generations, to ensure that everyone can enjoy it. Anybody that has worked or watched the legislator sessions or in politics, there were many bills that weren't passed this year. So it's not a reason to give up. We're going to keep pushing forward and keep educating people. And there was a lot of misconceptions out there. So we believe that, if we keep educating and having the positive conversations and building positive relationships, we'll keep moving forward.
State Senator Mary Kunish introduced the bill this year and indicates that she's ready to play a long game to get it passed.
I have a feeling it will be a multi-year because this was a new this was a new idea for the tribes to do this. And this is really hard for those counties and those communities up there to wrap their head around. So it's going to take a little bit of time, I have a feeling. But it's the start, and that's what's important.
Kunish mentioned counties, which are major stakeholders in these land return discussions. I met with a private archivist to get a snapshot of the situation. We reviewed county maps going back more than a century and looked at one small block called a township in Clearwater County. In 1867, it was all White Earth Reservation. By 1915, tribal ownership had withered, and by 2017, it was a sliver of its original scope. In contrast, Clearwater County today is the township's dominant landowner, and the pattern plays out in other counties. The nearby Leech Lake tribe celebrated a major land return this year when Congress gave back 11,000 acres. But it could have been more with additional county-level support.
When we started this process, we went to all the counties in the area and we were like, will you support us on this? not necessarily even support us on this, will you sign on to this, but will you agree not to oppose it? Cass County was the only county that agreed not to oppose the transfer. So when you look at the land that was transferred, it's all within Cass County. There's 4 counties that the reservation overlaps, which creates a lot of jurisdictional headaches when we have to, we're one sovereign tribe. We have to deal with 4 counties depending on where you are.
Jurisdictional headaches aside, the conversations between tribes and counties in northern Minnesota will likely continue because the alternative would be, well, giving up.
Bonjour, Anishinaabe Miigwanagaboikwe and Indigenous magazine and do it. So my name is Lori York, and I'm the executive director for White Earth Nation here, and I'm from Eagle Clan and Dawyig. White Earth Nation are the stewards of the land. We're the only ones that are able to ensure and protect for the next 7 generations that this land is protected for everyone to use. We have a significant spiritual connection to the land. It provides us food and water, medicines, and we have a very, anytime we go and harvest any of these medicines or the food, we do have ceremony. And it's going to be really important that we, as parents and grandparents, continue those teachings to the future generations so our children have healthy coping tools and mechanisms to live Bamadaziwen a good life. It's really important that we take care of Mama Aki.
For ICT from Anishinaabe Homelands, I'm Stewart Huntington.